After Columbus's landing here in the New World and word reaching Spain about this, a new kind of Spanish explorer was sent out, not only to just explore areas, but now it was the idea of conquering. So they became known as conquistadors, right? These were their goals to conquer these new areas, conquer these civilizations, and give more power to Spain. And we talked a little bit about this with Columbus and his motivations and how he convinced King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to fund him, the idea of God, gold, and glory. But I really want to kind of repeat that one more time because it's very important to this time period as to the motivations behind European exploration. The idea of God, especially for the Spanish, was being able to have new people that they could convert to Christianity, and Spain was highly religious. Gold, right? This idea of being able to discover these new treasures and riches in these areas that they had never been to before. And glory, right? The more areas that you conquered meant you had more land, more ways to trade, and of course, more power in that sense. So these three things were extremely important. The three G's really motivated not only Spanish conquistadors, but also motivated other European nations that we will talk about later on. So these Spanish conquistadors were both explorer and conqueror. Any riches that they discovered, any treasures, they were to give 20% of any treasure found, send that back to Spain. They were also able to keep percentages for themselves. And eventually, as they were victorious, right, these conquistadors would be able to retire as very important and very rich men, right? That was their ultimate goal. Early on, we have Hernan Cortes, who was one of these first conquistadors who came over in 1519. He landed in the area of what today would be Mexico around the Aztec Empire. And while there, he met a Aztec woman named Malintzin, who became an ally of his, and she introduced him to some of the enemies that the Aztecs had. And so Cortes was able to gather support from these enemies of the Aztecs. At that time, the Aztec Empire was ruled by Montezuma II. And at first, when Cortes first met Moctezuma and came to the capital city of Tenochtitlan, Moctezuma believed that Cortes might have been one of the gods. Right? And so he offered him gold and was welcomed by the people. And as Cortes saw all of these treasures that the Aztecs had, it pretty much sealed their fate. Because with that, Cortes took Moctezuma prisoner and tried to take over the city. However, the Aztecs were able to drive Moctezuma and his men out of the capital city of Tenochtitlan, but Cortes would return reinforced with larger numbers, and the Aztec Empire would be defeated, and so this area would now fall under Spanish control. We see a very similar story with Francisco Pizarro, who in 1532 came to the Inca Empire. Atahualpa was the leader of the Incas at this time. Same story. He welcomes Pizarro and his troops. Soon, Atahualpa is taken prisoner by the Spanish as well, and Pizarro and his soldiers are able to defeat the Inca Empire within a couple of years, and that territory that belonged to the Incas now falls to Spanish control, right, in what today would be known as the area of Peru. So we see that early on, these conquistadors come in. They are outnumbered by the Native Americans, but they are able to defeat these Native American tribes. And why is that? Why were the Spanish victorious despite the fact that they were outnumbered? And there's a few reasons for that. One of them, of course, is their weapons, right? Spanish steel, their armor, their weapons were highly superior to those in comparison to the Native Americans. They also had the advantage of the horse to be able to ride into battle, and that was something that was not native to the Americas, so the Native American civilizations didn't have that. The ability of making those allies with the enemies of those Native American civilizations, like the Aztecs and the Incas, had a lot of enemies from smaller tribes. Making those tribes their allies was something that was an advantage to the Spanish. And of course, the greatest advantage that the Spanish had over the Native Americans was the idea of the diseases that they brought with them. These European germs and diseases they brought was something that the Native Americans had no immunity to. So a lot of these groups were wiped out by huge epidemics when people became very, very sick. And that's one of the reasons why the Spanish was able to be so victorious over the Native Americans here in the Americas. And this Spanish victory, right, was going to have long lasting effects. Those being the fact that the Native American population itself is going to be greatly changed because their numbers are going to start to dwindle, right? They're going to decrease by large amounts. It meant that Spanish victory here in the Americas had Spanish dominance in the Americas, right? Right now, Spain was the only European country to start to have this power and control in the Americas and create these large colonies. Um, and it was going to be the start of what we talked a little bit about with Columbus, the idea of the Columbian exchange, right? We're going to begin to see even more of an exchange of goods, of ideas between these two continents, the old world and the new world, right? Native Americans and Europeans, this clash and mix of different things happening between both of these cultures. That Columbian exchange will have long lasting impacts on both those continents in that sense. So the idea of Spanish victory here in the Americas is not only just this concept of Spain creating colonies here, but just kind of keeping in mind that larger, long lasting impact that this communication or this meeting between these two groups of people are going to have, not only on themselves, but on future generations and on just the development of what happens here in the Americas and the development of Europe later on.